Good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we have a good amount of folks who've joined us. Thank you so much for your interest in the 2026 James Irvine Foundation Leadership Awards. I'm Cindy Downing, and I serve as the program officer overseeing the foundation's program. Today's webinar is designed to help you navigate the nominations process, understand the changes we've made this year, and get answers to your questions. We'll be giving you an overview of the program, our team, and the selection criteria process. We'll also share some tips for nominating a leader. The last 20 minutes of the webinar are reserved for your questions. If you have any questions during our presentation, please look for the Q&A tool at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We will either address them in real time or at the end of the webinar. So once again, thanks for joining us. Let's get started. To begin, I'll briefly share just a bit about the history of our organization with you. As a private foundation, Irvine has pursued its mission to expand opportunities for the people of California since its start in 1937. Irvine's grant making is focused on a California where all low-income workers have the power to advance economically, and we have a stated commitment to racial equity in our investments. In 2024 alone, we approved over 159 million in grants to 225 organizations. I wanted to also acknowledge that given the heart-wrenching events of the first few weeks of 2025, I'd encourage you all to check out our recent blog from our CEO, Don Howard. I'm proud of Irvine's steadfast commitment to championing fairness and equity for all California workers. And I'm delighted that the Leadership Awards program continues to flourish. The program plays an important role in lifting up critical work and innovative models of leaders, regardless of issue area, population, sector, or region. The program not only celebrates leaders, but also provides us with a way to learn and support work that directly affects the well-being of low-income Californians outside of Irvine's core grant making, which is needed now more than ever. If we could please go to the next slide. Um, as you may know, every year the awards program recognizes individuals who are confronting the state's critical challenges with innovative and effective solutions that improve people's lives and contribute to a better California. Irvine spotlights these exemplary leaders and helps to share their approaches with policymakers, peers, and provides each of their organizations with a $350,000 grant and additional resources to support each leader's work. Since 2006, Irvine has recognized 130 diverse and innovative California leaders. With that, I would like to now introduce the incomparable Melissa Granville. She is a partner at Capital Impact, who serves as the external manager for the awards program. She will provide an overview of the new nominations process and timeline. Thank you again all for your attention. Melissa, over to you.
Thanks, Cindy. Incomparable. Love that. Thank you. And hello, everyone. Welcome. And I'm excited to guide you through the updated nominations process for the 2026 Leadership Awards. We've introduced some significant changes this year, and I'll explain not only how the new process works, but also the reasoning behind some of these changes. Next slide. All right, so just to walk through at a high level, a few of the key changes. So first, we've simplified the nominations process into 2 steps. In the first step, nominators will submit a short, straightforward form with basic information about the nominee. And if the nominee accepts their nomination, they'll move on to step 2, which includes more detailed questions about their work. Second, we've introduced the option for leaders to nominate themselves, ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to participate, even if they don't have someone to formally nominate them. Lastly, we have eliminated the option for co-nominations. These are nominations submitted by 2 nominators. Each individual or pair of leaders can only be nominated by 1 person. So said another way, 1 person can nominate 2 people, but 2 people cannot nominate 1 person together. So just to share a little bit of background as to why we're making these changes. One is that In the past, nominators have shared that they've dedicated anywhere between 3 to 11 hours to complete a nomination. While we deeply value the thoughtfulness and effort that went into these submissions, we believe this level of commitment is too much to ask of those who are not the nominee or outside of the nominee's organization. We hope that by streamlining this process, we can reduce the upfront time and effort by nominators or for nominators and make it easier for people to participate, especially those who may not have extensive, detailed knowledge of the nominee's work. Ultimately, this change and the change on step 2 are to increase accessibility and inclusion. We hope that these changes reflect our commitment to making the awards accessible to a wider range of Californians, ensuring that more leaders from diverse communities have the opportunity to be recognized and celebrated. Another reason is that we hope to empower nominees to tell their own story. Nominees often have the most up-to-date and accurate information about their work, its impact, and how it aligns with the selection criteria. And so we hope by asking nominees to provide this information directly in step 2, we can ensure their stories are told in their own words and are as accurate and compelling as possible. Next slide. Now let's talk about how you'll submit your nomination. The official nominations form will go live on the Leadership Awards website on February 10th. Nominators will be asked to provide basic details about the nominee, such as their name, role, and organization, and how they know the leader they are nominating. Nominators will also be asked to answer 3 brief reflection questions. So why is the nominee's work important for California? What about this leader or their work inspires you? And how does the leader create opportunities for underserved communities? My colleague Catherine will provide tips for how to submit a competitive nomination in just a few minutes related to those questions. And excitingly, we are also starting this year, leaders may nominate themselves. So like external nominators, they will visit the Leadership Awards website after February 10th. Once the leader selects on the official nominations form that they are self-nominating, they may be invited to sign in or create an account in a submittable platform. For those who have been involved in the past, you may have an existing account associated with your email address in Submittable. It's the same system we used last year. Initially, self-nominees will be asked to provide basic information, including their name, organization, and contact information. And if you are nominating yourself as a part of a leadership pair, you will also provide details about your second nominee. Leaders who indicate that they are self-nominating will also need to provide the name and contact information of 2 validators, one primary and one secondary in the case the primary validator is not able to participate. Lastly, the self-nominees validator will be asked to answer the same 3 questions that an external nominator would have answered in that first round. So for example, why is the nominee's work important to California, and so on. Next slide. Great. And the second step of the process is a detailed nominee submission. So on March 14th, nominees will be invited to accept or decline their nomination. If they accept, they will sign in or create an account in the submittable platform and will provide detailed information about their work and its alignment with the selection criteria. For those who were involved in developing a nomination last year, this part of the process will look very similar as the questions are essentially the same. If you are self-nominating this year, you can create or log into your submittable account anytime after February 10th. You won't be able to submit your actual nomination, your detailed submission, until after March 14th. In the meantime, we encourage you to check out the questions on our website and start preparing your answers now. Next slide. Great. And ultimately, the Leadership Boards team values the views of colleagues, community leaders, clients, and others who know the nominee's work firsthand, and validators help illuminate the nominee's contributions, impact, and alignment with the selection criteria. From validators, we are interested in learning about their perspective on the nominee and their work, including why the nominee's work is important to California, what inspires them about the nominee, and how the nominee creates opportunities for underserved Californians. So how will this process work? The primary validator will receive an email with a link to the short form, which will look very similar to the external nominator form. They will receive this information as soon as the nominator provides contact information for the external validators in Submittable. The primary validator must complete the form, which includes the same 3 questions as the initial nominations form, by April 15th, 2025. If they do not submit materials by this date, the secondary validator will be invited to participate. Validators who decline to participate should notify us by email, and we will ask the second validator. Ultimately, we must receive completed materials from either the primary or secondary validator by April 30th, 2025, in order for the nomination to be accepted and reviewed by the review team. If you receive materials from both the validators, we will defer to the materials provided by the primary validator. Notably, this is very easy. In the tool itself, self-nominees will be able to see whether their validator has completed their submission or not, and send reminders through the Submittable platform to encourage them to submit everything in time for April 30th deadline. Next slide. So just to summarize, for extra clarity, here's a visual representation of the timeline for the full nominations process. So again, nominations will open on February 10th and close on March 12th. Please note that this deadline for nominations will not be extended this year, so please start working on that initial nomination as soon as possible. On March 14th, nominees will be notified and will be invited to start their nomination. They will have until April 30th to complete their detailed nominee submission. Validators will be notified as soon as the self-nominators submit their contact information between February 10th and March 12th. And primary and secondary validators must submit their information by April 30th. Next slide. Great. Let's talk about the selection committee and the selection timeline. So each year, an independent selection committee of California leaders identifies 4 to 6 recipients of the leadership awards. These leaders are distinguished for their extensive contributions to California communities and institutions. They work in diverse fields and reflect the ethnic and regional diversity of California. You can see these folks here, and they are also available on the Leadership Board's website. The Leadership Board's team which includes the selection committee here, will consider all substantive information in both parts of the nomination, including the nominators and nominees' responses to the narrative questions. The team will also consider demographic information about the leaders, and in the case of self-nominations, the team will also review the responses provided by one validator as identified by the nominee. Next slide. So what is the process for selecting these leaders? So the process really starts when amazing folks like you submit nominations that reflect the diversity of California's population and regions. So after the deadline on April 30th, staff will review and advance nominations that are most aligned with the selection criteria. In late July or early August, the selection committee will select 10 to 12 finalists who are then notified. In August, once the finalists have been contacted, all nominees and nominators will be notified about the status of their nomination. And between August and October, the Leadership Board's team and an expert in the finalists' field of work will meet with the finalists individually to better understand their work and its impact on California. The selection committee will meet again in late October or early November to review the learnings from these meetings and select the 4 to 6 award recipients. All finalists and recipients will be notified shortly after that decision. We anticipate announcing the 4 to 6 award recipients in February 2026, and the foundation spotlights these leaders and helps share their approaches with policymakers and peers. through a reception in Sacramento, meetings with policymakers, and other opportunities. With that, I hope this gives you a clear sense of how to navigate the process and to give you some tips on how to navigate it. Now I'll hand over to my colleague, Catherine, who will provide some helpful tips for submitting a competitive nomination. Catherine?
Hi, everyone. My name is Catherine Hazelton. I have been working with the Irvine Leadership Awards program since 2009, including as a nominations reviewer in the early stages of the nominations process before they get to the selection committee. So today I'm going to share some tips about preparing the content of nominations from the perspective of a reviewer. First, it's important to ensure that the leader you are nominating is eligible for a leadership award. So that means they are living. They could work in any sector whatsoever, private, public, nonprofit. They can work in any field, education, health, environment, etc. They must reside in California, and their work needs to have a strong basis in California. They can be, you can nominate either an individual or a pair of leaders. The leader you nominate should not be planning to retire or leave their organization within 1 year of the award announcement. So not before February 2027 in the case of the current award cycle. They should not be a regular grantee of the James Irvine Foundation. And there are some exceptions to this grantee policy. It's a little complex. So if your nominee is a current or recent grantee of the Irvine Foundation, I would encourage you to go to the FAQ on the Leadership Awards website and check out the various exceptions there. They may still be eligible. Your grantee also cannot, I'm sorry, your nominee also cannot have a conflict of interest with Irvine staff members, board members, or members of the Leadership Awards Selection Committee. So that might be a close family relationship or a financial relationship with any of those folks. You know, we get asked about competitiveness a lot. And like, how likely is a specific nominee to become a finalist for the Leadership Award? And we don't have a hard and fast competitiveness check for you, but yeah, we can provide some guidance here. So it's very hard to say who's competitive and who's not, and to ensure fairness, we're not able to comment on any specific nominees. But generally, we can recommend that your nominee should have a track record of effectiveness at their current organization. So at least 2 to 3 years of work with the organization. Similarly, the work or the project that the nomination focuses on should have some measurable track record. So if you are looking to nominate somebody who has not yet started a project that's in development, or if it's really just in the early stages, it's probably unlikely to be competitive in this awards program. We also look at whether the awards program has recently recognized someone doing very similar work. So does your nominee work in the same general field as a recent recipient? Like maybe they work in education and we recently recognized somebody who works in education. That's no problem at all. But if their work is focused on a very, very similar and specific body of work as a recent recipient of the awards, they might not be competitive for a couple of years. So for example, we most recently recognized a pair of leaders who were focused on supporting refugees in the San Diego region. So another leader supporting refugees in the San Diego region is probably not going to be competitive for that work within the next couple of years. Now, a specific example like that might be too close if to be competitive. So the top tip that I can give you for competitiveness is to demonstrate that your nominee's work is aligned with the selection criteria. That's what's really going to make them competitive. So let's talk about those. You see each of the selection criteria outlined here, and I'm going to go into greater detail on a few of these in a few minutes, but I'm just going to quickly note the criteria here. So significance. You'll want to think about, is the leader working on an issue that's critical to California and likely to affect the quality of life for a substantial number of Californians? With innovation, we want to know that the work represents either a new approach or one that's not widely known or practiced. But also we're interested in leaders who are applying a proven approach in a new way or in a new context. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Effectiveness, the leader's been highly effective in achieving positive change and their work has a measurable record of accomplishment. Inclusiveness, we are looking for leaders who build bridges among people, who bring diverse experiences to their work and who create opportunity for underserved communities. Timing, the leader's project is at a stage that's conducive to replication, or there exists urgency to for the nominee to expand upon their work. That's a really important one. And then leadership capacity. We want to know that the leader is well positioned and prepared to take the next step in advancing change. All right, so let's think about this from the perspective of a nominator. And now that we have our two-step process, I'd like to think about step one. In that process, as Melissa outlined, the nominator is going to provide some basic information about the nominee, and they're going to answer 3 substantive questions about the nominee. And we've outlined the 3 of those questions here. So I want to provide some tips for nominators and also for validators. Anyone who self-nominates will have a validator, and their validator will be asked to answer these 3 questions. So this is for nominators and validators who are completing the questions in step 1 of the nomination. These are the questions. The good news is that this section is now quite brief, and we no longer require or expect nominators to write a lot. In fact, we encourage nominators to be concise in answering these 3 questions. But at the same time, we know you want to be thoughtful about it. So I would encourage you to think about the selection criteria when you're answering each of these 3 substantive questions. The first question, why is the nominee's work important for California? The answer is probably going to be related to the significance criterion. So take a look at how we describe significance in the selection criteria. You're also going to want to think about timing. Why is this work relevant now? That's going to help you answer that question. For the second question, what about this leader or their work inspires you? This is, of course, a great place to talk about the leader's leadership capacity. You might also be inspired by their effectiveness or their inclusiveness. So whatever inspires you about the leader is welcome here, but I might suggest thinking about these 3 criteria as you form your answer. And then the third question, how does this leader create opportunities for underserved communities? This, of course, is a great place to address inclusiveness. And you might also want to think about how we frame the significance criterion. There could be some overlap there. There also might be some opportunities to connect with the innovation criteria on this third question. Another piece of the puzzle for nominators are often wondering, and nominees often wonder as well, who should write a nomination? Well, we get this question a lot, and the answer really is anyone can nominate, truly anyone. And now, of course, people can nominate themselves. Some might think that it's important to get a very prominent person to submit their nomination. And, while this is interesting and it might be considered by the selection committee, there are lots of other types of nominators who can describe and validate a nominee's work and provide context for why it's important. The most important factor is that the nominator is well acquainted with the nominee and can describe their alignment with the award criteria. So some nominators know the nominee's policy field really well, and they can describe how their approach is different from their peers. They might be able to identify where there's an opportunity for expansion or replication. This might be a policymaker, or a funder, or a researcher, maybe a board member. Others can describe how they personally or other community members have been affected by the nominee's work. So this might be a client or another community leader who has observed the nominee in action. That you would be able to provide really great anecdotes and perspective on these 3 questions. So while anyone can nominate, including the nominee themselves, we encourage nominations from people who have direct knowledge of the leader's work. So a personal friend or a family member might make a less compelling nominator if they can't speak to the nominee's work. All right, I want to move on to the step 2 questions, which would be answered by the nominee themselves. So just like in step 1, our top tip is to address the selection criteria when you are answering the questions in the full nomination form. So as reviewers read each nomination, we assign scores based on how closely the nomination aligns with each one of the selection criteria. So this means it's really important to use the prompts and address the criteria and the specific questions that we ask in the nominations form. We provide word and character counts, so be sure to use those. You'll want to think about whether you focus your nomination on the full scope of work that you lead or on a specific element of your work, which might be a model or a project that you as the nominee developed or that you are advancing. So if you're trying to focus on a specific model, a portion of your work that is a specific project or model, make that clear in the nomination. You can tell us a little bit about your full organization, but then focus most of the nomination on the model. Okay, let's think about a few of the specific criteria. First, significance. In the significance section, you're going to describe the problem that you're working to solve and why it's important to California. We recommend that you also describe the population or the community that's affected by the problem. We would recommend that you indicate the number of people who are affected now or who you project will be affected in the future. That'll really help us get an understanding of the significance. Moving on to the innovation section, when we're scoring that, we think about whether the leader's work might serve as an informative model for other communities. Could it influence how others would approach a similar problem? We consider many different forms of innovation. So we think of it generally in 3 different ways. Perhaps the leader's work represents an entirely new approach. No one's really done this before. So this might be a creative leap from standard practices, kind of the traditional definition of innovation. That certainly applies here. But we also look at projects and work that are not widely known or practiced in California. So this could be a very traditional, long-term approach that's well known in a community, but it's not widely known outside of that community. And so we still consider that innovative because it could influence how others approach the problem in their own communities. And we also think of innovation as when a leader applies a proven approach in a new way or within a new context. So for example, there might be an effort that has worked really well in Los Angeles or another large city, but it's never really been tried in a rural area. And the leader took the model into a rural area and demonstrated that it could be effective there too. We would consider that innovation. Similarly, a leader might take a model or an approach that's worked really well in one field, like let's say it's worked in an education setting, and they adapt that model to work in a different setting, like in corrections. And that we would consider innovation as well. All right, let's talk a little bit about effectiveness. In the effectiveness section, we're looking for how the leader has achieved positive change or has directly improved people's lives. Has the leader made substantial progress in addressing the problem? The biggest tip for this section is to provide as many examples and tangible, measurable pieces of information that you might have, such as data from evaluations, case studies, surveys, or comparisons to similar groups. You can also share evidence that your work has inspired policy changes or changes in people's behavior. That can be a really compelling indicator of effectiveness. Some nominations provide anecdotes about how the work directly impacts a community or people's lives. Others include examples that demonstrate the emotional impact of a leader's work. For example, a thought-provoking work of art that has been widely viewed or cited. That can be really helpful in understanding effectiveness. What is less helpful is changes within the organization, like budget or staffing levels. That tends to be less compelling, though it might be worth noting if they far exceed expectations, or if they're really connected to a leader's programmatic goals. For instance, if it's a workforce type organization and the leader has increased their own workforce tenfold using their model, that could be relevant. Okay, I'm going to pause there on the specific criteria to note. I'll pause on the specific criteria, and I want to note that we also provide a score that we call holistic review, and that's where we kind of step back, look at the entirety of the nomination, and as we're scoring holistic review, we tend to really think about diversity, uniqueness of the nomination, and the opportunity that it represents. So I want to just talk a little bit more about how that looks for us. So when we're looking at diversity, we wonder, does this particular nomination diversify the nominations pool? And we consider a number of different factors. The region in which the leader works, the leader's ethnic background, any life experiences that the leader may bring to their work, especially if those experiences inform how they conduct their work. We look at the issue on which the leader works, their sector, whether it's public, private, or nonprofit. Really, we're looking for a diverse pool of nominees to send to the selection committee and ultimately be recognized. And that's where we get some of that uniqueness factor as well. We always are excited by nominations for work that the Leadership Awards program hasn't recognized in the past, and that might not be reflected in the pool. And then there's the opportunity piece that's quite important as well. We like to think about the opportunities that a leader might have to leverage a leadership award if they were to receive it. So how would receiving an award create new opportunities for this leader to expand their work or to inform policy? Is the leader's work likely to be prioritized by policymakers and peers over the next few years? Is the work ready to be replicated? And is the leader ready to take it to the next level? We also think about, would recognition with a leadership award or the resources from this award really make a difference for this leader? Or is the leader's organization so large and the leader already so well known that an award wouldn't go down? So we think about all those things as we're creating the holistic review score. I'm going to stop there for now and turn the conversation back over to Melissa so she can invite any questions that you all might have.
Thanks, Catherine. So we answered a few questions in the chat. Thank you already for submitting them. And we want to provide an open opportunity for you to ask any kind of general questions about the process or selection criteria or how to submit a competitive nomination, either in the chat or the Q&A. So I'm going to just give some time for folks to fill any questions in if they have them. While folks are doing that, I'll share just a few helpful resources as you're considering a nomination. We have updated the frequently asked questions page on our website to address what we think are going to be the common questions about the process, the questions that are going to be on each step of the nominations process. So what will be on the nominations form versus the step 2 nominee submission. So highly recommend checking that out and digging into some of the questions that we consider. But again, this is a brand new process and we really want you to help inform that page and how we're answering some of these questions. So appreciate you being here. Okay, so I see a question. If a leader goes the self-nomination route, both the leader and the validator will have to answer the same questions in writing. No. So the validator will answer the same question as a nominator would. The self-nominee would just provide answers to the selection criteria questions that Catherine outlined. So kind of similar to last year, if you nominated last year, they will not have to answer the same questions. I hope that addressed that. Okay. Ultimately, we're looking, just to reiterate, ultimately what we're looking for with the validator or an external nominator is that they can provide their perception on the work that the nominee is doing, so that the nominator doesn't have to do that themselves in some ways. Okay. What if you do not have formal research on the impact of the nominee's work? They work in CDCR facilities, and getting external evaluations done on their program is challenging. You do not need formal research on the impact of your nominee's work. And part of what we're hoping to do with this process is that the nominee will be able to provide existing data and existing impact things about their work in that step 2. In step 1, we're not expecting that external folks, external validators, will have that level of data to be able to provide about a nominee. So that isn't the expectation, but the nominee themselves can provide whatever impact data, evidence of effectiveness that they have available to them. As Catherine mentioned, having quantitative data of impact isn't the only thing we're looking for. If you have stories or other evidence of effectiveness, that is valuable as well. Catherine and Cindy, anything else to add on that piece?
Nope, I think you covered it. I would also say that it's actually pretty rare to see a nomination that has a formal evaluation.
Yes.
So definitely don't be, worried that you need to have that.
Yes. And we really hope that in the step 2, if the nominee or someone from their organization is providing this information and submittable, that you really can use other proposals or other things that you have in-house, marketing materials, to be able to pull that information from, so it doesn't feel burdensome. We have a question in the Q&A. Can the nominees send this webinar to our validators? Absolutely. Share it far and wide. Anybody can look at this. We also are going to put some timestamps on it on our blog. So if you just want to point them to the validator section, you're more than welcome to. We also have several, we have a section of our FAQ page that just has questions and answers dedicated to validators and external nominators. So highly recommend sending that to them as well. I think it's also very cool if you do decide to self-nominate. In the tool, you can send reminders to your validators as well and communicate that way, instead of having to chase them down via phone or what have you. We have another question in step 1. Are there word counts? Yes. We don't, part of keeping that low in kind of burden is that we would like to keep that relatively short for both the validator and the external nominator. Great. Any other questions about the process or how to submit a competitive nomination? Give just a few more minutes. All right. Well, we really hope that you'll take the time to review the FAQs on our website. Thanks, Cindy, for dropping that into the chat. On our website, you can also check the nominator page, which has additional details. Good question, Johnny. Okay, if the nominator knows a committee member, can I contact him or her for advice? I would recommend not doing that. They're going to tell you exactly, even if you did, they'd tell you exactly what we're telling you here, and that is on the nominations website and on the FAQ page. Thank you for asking. And if you do have more questions as you start thinking through your nomination or your nominee submission, feel free to reach out to us. But we really did think this through and tried to provide answers, as many answers as we could think of on the website. So hopefully it's addressed there. But if you still have questions, feel free to reach out to us. And one just quick note that We will provide you kind of general guidance, but just to maintain fairness across all those that consider nominations, we won't advise on specific content or competitiveness of any individual nominations. And yeah, I'll just end with saying thank you. Thank you for considering a nomination and for elevating leaders and their innovative solutions to us. It's honestly my favorite time of the year, and it brings me a lot of hope and joy to get to learn about the work that is happening across our state. So just want to say that we will share this recording with everybody who's attended this and RSVP'd, and we'll put a blog on our website too, so you can refer to it. And yeah, just thank you again, and hope you have a great rest of your day.